Nei. Commander Key. Dark Ages. What? Duke Nukem 2? Sure.
I am back.
Oh, fuck!
Strange silicone-based life form.
You're back.
Always bet on Duke.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about it?
Got milk?
Woo-woo. Hello everyone, Alyxx the Rat here again. Say, do you remember the first game you played? Cause I honestly got into gaming so early that I have no memory of what my actual first game was. But what I do remember is the first game that left an impression on me. That game was Duke Nukem. And no, I'm not talking about Duke Nukem 3D, I'm talking about the very beginning. You know, the game that's actually called Duke Nukem, or Duke NuKUM. Oh boy. I kinda got a bit confused about the name for a bit due to some perceived possible copyright issues with a Captain Planet character. Duke Nukem is the first game that I remember. It made such a huge impression on me that it became synonymous with PC gaming, and I believe it's more or less become part of my DNA at this point. I keep it constantly installed in DOSBox, and now and then I'll load it up and play it through an episode or two. Duke Nukem is pure and simple action fun. It did everything to establish Duke Nukem as a character, with the game more shaped around his character than anything else. He was envisioned not really as an action hero parody like a lot of people like to think. Instead, he was more of an homage, an amalgamation of every 80s mega buff beefcake, the forbidden love child of Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Van Damme, and Bruce Campbell. He is the incarnation of pure testosterone fueled with chismo, and that's something that the game was built from ground up to be focused around. Duke Nukem stood out a lot at the time, not just because it had some nice parallax scrolling effects and flipping EGA cards of the time, something that not even the first Commander Keen trilogy dared to do until the later games, but it was also an extremely fun game. What it does very well is add a sense of interactivity to the world around Duke. So the cans can be collected for health, or you can shoot them in the air and cash them for bonus points instead. Turkeys give you 1 unit of health, but shoot them and you get a roasted turkey that adds 2 points instead. Some boxes contain balloons that give a whole bunch of points but will pop if you shoot them. Some boxes contain health items while others contain dynamite that can hurt you if you touch it. It's this kind of dynamic gameplay that made Duke stand out and establish what the series would be all about going forward. But we're not here to talk about the first Duke Nukem, we're here to talk about the sequel.
Shake it, baby.
Oh, not that sequel. This sequel.
Don't have time to play with myself.
Duke Nukem 2, we see Duke taking on a whole new enemy. After defeating Dr. Proton and ending up on a talk show talking about his new book titled Why I'm So Great, aliens start invading and abduct Duke on the air. It turns out the aliens called Rigel. Turns out the aliens want to put Duke's brain patterns into a computer to invade Earth because of his superior combat skills. And that's pretty much all the story there is to the game. Duke's back, ready to kick ass and save Earth from the alien menace. I actually never played Duke Nukem 2 when I grew up, so while I did play a lot of the first Duke Nukem and later on Duke 3D, Duke Nukem 2 kinda eluded me for a long time. It wasn't until I was in high school and got on the web that I learned about Duke Nukem 2, which I had no idea existed at that point. To me it was like finding the missing link, because in many ways Duke Nukem 2 feels very much like it bridges the gap between 3D and the original. Already one major difference from the first game though is how you can choose a difficulty level. Easy, normal and hard. On easy there are less enemies. Enemies generally are easier, well duh, and there are more power-ups. Normal is pretty much in the middle, while hard adds more enemies, makes them tougher and has less power-ups. There are also some subtle differences in level design between the difficulty levels, so if you've beaten the game on easy or normal, you might consider doing it again on hard to see the differences and get a more difficult challenge. Duke Nukem 2 carries on a lot of things from the first game, but evolves the concepts a bit to mix things up. Now you can find entire 6 packs of soda that refill your entire health. The nuclear health pickup from Duke 3D also makes its debut here, although it functions a lot differently. It only gives you 1 unit of health if you're hurt, but at full health it gives you a lot of points. So it very much feels like an incentive to play carefully. I also love how Duke runs around collecting his own memorabilia. You get points for collecting floppy disks containing the game, video game cartridges, t-shirts, ghetto blasters, video cameras and so on. Considering how these things are everywhere, you can really see how early on Duke's ego got established. I know Duke Nukem Forever gets a lot of shit for showcasing Duke as a bit of an egomaniac, and God knows Duke Nukem Forever has its share of problems. But in my opinion, showcasing Duke as a narcissist is definitely not inaccurate, since that's been one of his traits from the beginning. But Duke Nukem Forever is another topic for another day, so let's not get into that. They've also added these orbs you can pick up for points, though you actually get secret bonus points for shooting all of them, which can almost be even more challenging since they kinda drop down everywhere. And the turkeys you can roast are now live turkeys that run around before you roast them, which, come to think of it, that's a bit messed up. There are also orbs that give you 10,000 points and then hints if you bring them to a hint station, though you also get secret bonus points for shooting them. In the first game you had some boxes that would contain dynamite that exploded and created a line of fire on the ground. In this game they've made them a lot more volatile. Instead of dynamite they're now full on bombs, and the explosion can not only damage you, it can also damage enemies and affect pickups in the same way your guns can. So if you explode a bomb near a soda can, it will fly up. If you do it near a 6-pack of soda, it will explode, etc. In many ways they can be seen as a sort of additional weapon, since you can use them tactically to damage enemies. In the first game they were in these grey boxes, which typically indicated an item, but in Duke 2 they put them in red boxes. Red boxes also contain health. It's a bit sneaky since it's not easy to tell the difference, at least I'm unable to, so a lot of the time I end up accidentally destroying health pickups when they are placed right next to a bomb. Now the original Duke Nukem had some gun upgrades, but here you actually have different gun upgrades with limited ammo. The laser is capable of shooting through things, the rocket is able to kill pretty much everything in less than 3 hits, and the flamethrower can be used to fly if you aim it down, making it kind of a proto jetpack. A thing to keep in mind is that your regular gun cannot kill turrets. It takes a lot more shots to kill enemies in a lot of cases, especially on the hard difficulty where enemies have a lot more health, so often it's wise to reserve ammunition when you have an upgrade. You can also find a rapid fire power-up that turns your gun into an automatic, so that's a very useful one if you're stuck with the base weapon. A lot of the power-ups from the first game are gone though. Now Duke can hang on to ledges without the need for special glove, and there are no jump upgrades either. It kind of removes a bit of that sense of progression the first game had, where Duke would get increasingly stronger as you play through each episode. Here pretty much every power-up is a temporary one, and so that's sadly lacking here. The game definitely makes up for it in the increased variety of level themes, but I just wish they had kept that for this game. That being said, Duke Nukem 2 feels more cohesive in terms of level design. I especially love how in episode 4 you start on the outside of a space shuttle and have to work your way inside and then end up in space. There's even a level where if you shoot the airlocks you get sucked out into space. Kind of a grim death, but definitely gives the game a feeling like there's some realism to it. And it kind of gives this feeling of playing an action movie, and I think that's definitely intentional. And looking at some of the enemies here, you can definitely see like some proto-Duke 3D ideas forming. Like these slime enemies that can crawl on ceilings and try to attack Duke. You don't really see any enemies from the first game returning, although some of the enemies feel a bit similar. There are a lot of tech-bot-like enemies, and enemies that look a lot like Terminators, so the influence, it's still there. But there's a lot more variety in enemies for sure, and more interesting designs as well. Though one of the weakest aspects of the game are the bosses. They provide a decent enough challenge, especially on hard, but can be a bit too easy compared to the levels themselves. Like, the level 1 boss is fine, but especially the episode 3 boss was a complete joke. It's in fact the only other level where you get the gunship, and yeah, just look at this. Pretty pathetic, right? The good news is the final boss is definitely no pushover and has an actually challenging pattern. You can only hit his dome, which is easier said than done with how he moves. He also constantly releases homing projectiles at you, which also makes it challenging. It also doesn't help he has turrets firing at you that you have to take out before you can focus on him. Once you get the pattern down, he is not so bad either, but it makes me wish the other bosses were just as interesting. I feel there are some wasted opportunities here. Speaking of, that flying vehicle, yeah, it's only in a couple stages, literally, which is a huge wasted opportunity. It's really fun to use and extremely overpowered, as it has an automatic laser that absolutely devastates anything in your path. So that might be the reason, as it definitely needs levels that are designed around it, and there really isn't much to do with it in the regular level design. I just wish we had more levels with it, as it's just way too fun to use, and it could have been very useful in the final boss battle, for instance. Like in the first Duke Nukem, you can get bonus points by collecting letters spelling out Duke's name. In the first game you spelled out Duke, D-U-K-E, but here is his last name, NuKUM, which I think is a clever touch. You only get bonus points if you collect the letters in order though. Actually, wouldn't it be kind of funny if the HUD listed the letters as you collected them so you could actually spell the name wrong? Like, suddenly you're looking at your HUD and realize you just spelled common. Anyway. Now, why are we talking about Duke Nukem 2 in 2022, you may ask? Well, other than the numbers matching up and the fact I think the game is freaking awesome, the game just got ported to modern systems thanks to Nikolai Witzke-Hohendorf, also known as Lethal Guitar. Rigel Engine is a brand spanking new version of Duke Nukem 2 that runs natively on Windows, Linux and Mac PCs, supporting widescreen resolutions, modern gamepads, and adds several quality of life features, such as the ability to quick save, smoother scrolling, and even mod support. It's still in beta, but what we've got is already a much better way of experiencing Duke Nukem 2 than playing the original game in DOSBox. And in many ways, I think it makes the original version entirely obsolete. The quick save feature in particular is worth it alone, as it really makes it a lot less painful to play, particularly on hard difficulty. It doesn't really make the game that much easier unless you save skim a lot, but it cuts down on the repetition a lot, making the game overall a more fun experience. It also has several HUDs to choose from, and the default one definitely looks neat, but I actually prefer the one by Rubar, which is the one I've been using in this footage. It has a transparent radar and item box that allows you to see the whole width of the screen and putting everything pretty neatly along the bottom of the viewport. Graphically, the game looks generally a lot better than the first Duke Nukem, thanks to it using VGA instead of EGA. This was something Epic Games beat them to with titles like Jazz Jaggerbit and Jewel of the Jungle. That being said, Duke Nukem 2 technically still uses 16 colors, it just uses a 16 color VGA palette. But the color palette is very nice, and I love the artwork, and not to mention the high variety in settings and level designs. The only downside is that they've made all the sprites larger, and thus the game feels a lot more zoomed in. You can use the direction buttons to move the camera up and down a bit to see further above and below you. But sometimes it can be a bit of a pain when something surprises you from above or below because you couldn't see it. Though this can also sometimes be a blessing in disguise, as anything outside of you isn't being processed by the game, which you can use to your advantage. Like if you shoot a bomb and you're afraid of it accidentally making soda cans fly, you can just walk the other way and it won't affect them. Though this can also be annoying since your shots won't actually hurt enemies that aren't visible. The first Duke Nukem game was definitely not standing out much in terms of sound. With no support for sound cards and with only PC speaker noises, it wouldn't be hard to top it. Granted, I have a lot of nostalgia for PC speaker sound effects, especially those in the first game, but man, did they improve on that in Duke Nukem 2. It supports Adlib and Sound Blaster cards, with the latter offering digitized sound effects. There's a complete Adlib soundtrack to the game as well, and it's definitely up there as one of my absolute favorite Adlib soundtracks. I just love this sort of gritty feel to the music, and it has a kind of edgy rock vibe to it that I enjoy. It's pretty much the same reason I am really into Sega Mega Drive music, as it uses similar technology. But yeah, being able to hear proper sound effects, not to mention Duke actually having a voice, feels like it puts the game a whole generation ahead of the first one, even if it came out only a couple of years afterwards. Apparently this became a bit of a trend with the original Duke Nukem trilogy, seeing as how Duke Nukem 3D also was a massive step forward for the franchise, giving Duke Nukem even more of a voice and personality than before. You can still play the game with PC speaker if you're playing the DOS version, though in my opinion it's not nearly as enjoyable as playing the game with full Sound Blaster support. Duke Nukem 2 is very much a bit of a forgotten entry in the franchise. With how Duke Nukem 3D completely overshadowed the first two games and straight up rebooted the franchise into a mainstream success with its fair share of controversy and notoriety, it's easy to see why. But that doesn't mean Duke Nukem 2 isn't worth playing. Not by a long shot. Despite its shortcomings, the difficulty is way more balanced, the levels are far more interesting, and the sound and graphics are all superior to the first game. Like I said at the beginning, it feels like a stepping stone between the first and third entries in the franchise, so definitely check it out, especially with how the Rigel Engine makes the game way more playable than it ever was before. I really am grateful for this modern version of the game. In lieu of an actual remaster, it's nice to have a modern port that in every way brings out the best Duke Nukem 2 has to offer, and makes it feel fresh and modern again. While it's still in beta, I strongly recommend grabbing it, and I look forward to seeing what more features will be added in future updates. You can find a link in the description. So, that's all I have to say about Duke Nukem 2 and the Rigel Engine. See you later, and take care.